had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cello Chat. With us today is Allison Rich. Allison, how are things?
Things are just peachy.
That's terrific. That's terrific.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited about this as well. I actually ran across your dad at the conference, music conference yesterday, and just reminded me again how fun this is going to be this February. I mean, it's like it's always fabulous, I think, always great fun to play with orchestras, concertos. And then, of course, it's always fun playing cello duets. So what could be better? Now we
Exactly, exactly.
cello. Okay, so your musical background, why cello in the first place, and then where did your educational journey take you to where you are now?
Well, you mentioned running into my dad, and we'll start there. So, I grew up in a musical household. The question wasn't whether we would play music. We had to start an instrument. We had to learn to read music, to play music, but we could choose our instrument.
Okay.
So, my dad is a conductor and a tuba player, professionally, and then my mom is an excellent amateur flute player. So my brother and I naturally play string instruments. We just wanted to be different, I think.
I like that.
Um, but yeah, truly, both of us had been playing piano since we were quite young, and then as soon as we could, we were so excited to start playing string instruments like in the public school system. I mean, I consider myself to have had a bit of a late start at 8 years old. I mean, that's not exactly old, but for a string player, many students start when they're teeny tiny.
Yeah.
So anyway, of course, grew up with a lot of support from my very musical parents and my very musical family. And they got me involved. I'm a Wisconsin native, so I was involved right away with the Milwaukee Youth Symphony Orchestra. I did that for years and years and years. Took lessons downtown Milwaukee and chamber music and all that stuff while I was growing up. Then went off to Eastman for my undergrad, and had just the most phenomenal experience there. My time there was unique in a way because I was in Steve Doan's studio while I was at Eastman. However, my freshman year, Mr. Doan was on sabbatical. So that first year when I was just starting college, I was studying with David Yang.
All right.
And that was, I mean, such a blessing in so many ways. I just so admire his playing, of course, but the way he thinks about the cello and oh yeah, just what an incredible human being. And so that was a really kind of interesting way to start my college time in Mr. Doan's studio, was not with Mr. Doan. Anyway, and then you asked about my sort of schooling paths. After that, I went to do my master's with Richard Aaron at the University of Michigan, which was a hugely formative experience for me. I loved working with Richard. We can talk more about that, I'm sure. Then after that, I moved to Canada, and I went to study with Joe Johnson at the University of Toronto. And the reason I tell the story in that way is because it loops me back to Wisconsin. So when I was in high school, that happened to be when Joe Johnson was the principal cellist of the Milwaukee Symphony.
Aha.
And at the time, my teacher, who was also another MSO player, said, "Oh, you've got to study with Joe. You've got to get a few lessons with him." And so here I am, this like eager 17-year-old, and studied with Joe and just had the time of my life. Then, a decade later, I auditioned for him as a very different cellist. And really, I can't say enough good things about Joe Johnson. He's just what a phenomenal mentor.
Tremendous, tremendous. Yeah, that's David Ying has been a guest on this program as well. And I mean, yeah, he has a fascinating mind. His way of putting things is just so thoughtful, and and there's you unpack more of it later. You go, that was a really good comment, you know. So I mean, I think a lot of us come from a variety of teachers who helped us in different ways, but had, in many cases, very different approaches to how a lesson would run and what the main focus would be. So, how would you contrast those, Ying and Doan and Aaron and Johnson?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I'm lucky in a way because at each stage of my development, I think I needed the type of teacher that I
Uh,
had. And I wouldn't have switched the order. I needed to be 18 when I was with Mr. Doan and David Ying, and I needed to be, like I needed to be in my master's by the time I got to Richard Aaron. And with Joe as well, I needed to be at a different stage of my development. So yeah, they really have different approaches. I think I being at Eastman, obviously those two cellists are just phenomenal teachers, thinkers, musicians, performers, everything. They are incredible. And I needed that environment, that incredibly rigorous, and yet nurturing environment at Eastman. But I think I left that feeling like kind of wound up and insecure about my own playing. I mean, they were incredible mentors and it had nothing to do with them. But I think I worked so hard and I practiced and I just wanted to be this idea of what a cellist is. I just wanted it so badly and I was working so hard and learning a ton at the same time. But I think I got to this very sort of anxious place as I entered my master's. And again, I want to be very clear, it had nothing to do with Steve Doan or with David Ying. It was just my own development and being in that environment. Again, I learned so much about, especially I will say, Steve Doan's book, Cello Ergonomics. I still use it basically every time I sit down at the cello. Some of those exercises every time. I mean, the way he thinks about the way the body moves,
yeah,
the way the cello works, how to play without injuring yourself. I mean,
yeah.
it truly formative in my cellistic development. Then, when I went to be with Richard Aaron, I think I just needed his attitude and his approach to cello playing. And for me, he may be different with other students, but with me, he had this attitude like, well, of course, you'll be fine. He just had this easy confidence of
Nice.
here are the things that we're going to do, and you will do them. I know you will, and then things will go well. And whether it was true or not, whether he believed it, I needed to hear that, and I worked diligently and just felt like, oh yes, if I needed that external confidence in order to build my own internal confidence. And I don't know if you met Richard Aaron? I'm sure you have.
No, I think the most is, hearing him talk, a master class, but I don't think I've actually ever, shaken hands or introduced myself. Yeah, I'd love to at some point.
I mean, I think before getting to know him, I was a little intimidated. He's this very famous cellist, very famous
Right.
teacher, and I thought that he would be, kind of gruff and intense, and not at all. So just the most confident, just always has a huge smile on his face. He's so excited to talk about cello technique
Yeah.
and so confident. He's, let me tell you, you're gonna be great. And I needed that kind of energy. But his approach was, I think I always had an interest in cello technique and exercises, but that during my master's and within his studio, that interest really blossomed. So the studio at Michigan, we had, in addition to a weekly performance class, a regular sort of studio class, I would say, on the weekends we would have a scales class, a technique class. And we would sort of cycle through, everybody had to come in on a Saturday morning, usually at like 10 a.m., which was not so friendly for the undergrads. But we would all come in and play scales, arpeggios, exercises, and we would talk technique and about, about an hour as a full studio. Undergrads and grad students would come in and do this. And I couldn't get enough of it. I loved it. And I felt that that was a huge boost to my confidence, feeling like I had a genuinely deep understanding of what I was doing at the cello and like new tools in my toolbox of problem solving techniques.
Nice.
That was just huge for my confidence. So yeah, that was a big part of his teaching style. The emphasis on technique, I think, really worked for me, and as far as I know, to this day, is a big part of his teaching at summer festivals, in his studios, both.
And then Johnson?
Yes, well, so by the time I got to Joe, going into my DMA, I felt the most important thing, Joe treated me like a real peer. And I think that was critical for my development as well. I had all this, now a solid foundation, and I needed him to kind of give me permission to come into my own as a teacher and as a performer. Not that no one needs permission to be those things, but
But you got the mind game, right?
exactly,
Right. Yeah.
exactly. Joe was the first person, the first mentor that I had that truly trusted me. Like, he would go off to tour and perform, and then he said, "Okay, you're teaching all the lessons this week." So I served as his TA while I was doing my doctorate, and he trusted me to do that, and that meant the world to me. So yeah, he respected my thoughts as a performer, and even in our lessons, the way that we talked about music, he very clearly valued my opinion. I mean, all of my teachers did, but I think it feels different when you're doing a doctorate and feeling like I have all this knowledge and I want to share it, but I'm not sure if I'm good enough yet, allowed yet. But so he was huge as far as making me feel like a real peer.
Wow, that's terrific. I love that. And it's funny what you say about being at the right time with the right pairing, because I mean there have been other people I've had as guests on this show, other people that I know where there are times that they'll say, "Boy, this person was a great teacher, but I don't think it was the right time for me to a bit," and it's neat that it lined up that way for you. Yeah, Doan, it was kind of occurred to me that I didn't have much familiarity with him until the first I heard him was actually over at a ESTA, European String Teachers Association conference, and I've had come all the way over to here to hear, somebody from the other side of the pond. But again, talk about another smart cookie. I've been
Unbelievable, right?
following his stuff since as well. Well, that's great. That's um I mean, of course, all of us know that we have to spend time in the practice room and we have to know what we're doing and what we want to accomplish and everything like that. But the right teacher, just like the way you're describing it, can be such a catalyst and mentor and just, talk about fueling our progress. That's really neat.
I feel I should say I haven't said it yet, and I want to emphasize how lucky I am. I mean, I studied with some incredible people, and I'm lucky that you know, I'm just very, very lucky and very grateful to have just been around some of these cellists, just phenomenal players,
That's
thinkers.
that's cool. And then since then, in addition to orchestral playing, you have been involved in a lot of contemporary music in particular. How many contemporary ensembles do you play as a part of?
Oh gosh, as many as I possibly can. I
That's what I kind of like.
I know. Well, so in Toronto, Toronto is an amazing city, and one thing, it's a very saturated art scene, which is it's very exciting to be there. There's this the ensemble is called the Esprit Orchestra,
Mhm.
ESPRIT, and it's a full orchestra entirely devoted to contemporary music. I mean, full season, full cohort of musicians, is so exciting, always playing exclusively contemporary music. And those concerts are very well attended. I'm always shocked to see people so excited for this kind of repertoire the way that I am. It's very exciting. So that, and then I'm always putting together chamber music groups. I wouldn't say that I'm a part of a single group, like, oh, it's, oh, my trio, we always play contemporary music. Nothing like that, but I play, like I say, as often as possible with putting together chamber music.
All right.
And for
Well,
me, the newer the better.
nice, wild. Well, I was going to say, with your interest in cello technique, I would think that would be a real boon for approaching a lot of contemporary music. I mean, of course, we always want to play everything as musically as possible too, but there are times where with the contemporary piece, and you look and go, wait, they want me to do that and then get over to here. How am I going to even choreograph that? How is that possible at that tempo? And so to have a lot of fascination by the technique and open-mindedness about trying an entirely new way to get from point A to point C. I imagine that helps a lot.
I think so. And I think it's not, I think that's true. I also think that as studying technique and technical exercises, that's what I'm primarily interested in. It's it's a way to build the problem solving muscle and the critical thinking. And I think that can apply to contemporary music, but it can apply to the sort of more, let's call it standard repertoire. It can apply to any musical endeavor. What I'm doing, or ideally in an ideal situation, to me, the beauty of the technical exercises is building this confidence and an avenue for creative practice. Obviously, there's a lot of benefit to just playing the exercise you see on the page. But what I try to emphasize with my students and in my own practice is, okay, what is this composer getting at? What is this technician trying to teach me to do? How can I vary it? How does this apply to what I'm doing? Or what if I tried this on a different string? What if I tried this in a different position? Or could I apply this technique to something else? Like it's building that problem solving muscle and the critical thinking skills of, what am I doing and why, that metacognition. So
Yeah.
for me, having that experience, then when a problem arises, you know, if I if I or any cellist has extensive experience with technical study, maybe deliberately or maybe instinctively, you draw upon that knowledge and feel a little bit more able to tackle problems. I don't know. I think to me, exercise practice is creative practice
Yeah.
and critical thinking, building that critical thinking. So yes, I think it helps a lot in contemporary music, but I think it helps
Yeah. All across
in
the board.
in any practice. It's just how does one think about the cello? How does
Yeah.
one problem solve?
All
And it's
right.
just a really
Go
nice.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's just a really nice avenue, a template to have that kind of to build that muscle.
Right, right. I like that a lot. There are a couple thoughts come to mind. There are, of course, books on cello technique that use a lot of prose and go into intricate, great detail. And then there are other things like a lot of the Sevchik exercises. You play through it and you try to do it very precisely and at the tempo and everything, and you're able to deduce. Oh, okay, this isn't just teaching me this, it's also teaching me this other thing. But he didn't spend the time to write out, and by the way, blah, blah, blah. And then to another point is the that modifying it. There's something about when we make it our own, when it feels like it's somewhat our exercise too, it's all the more real, natural, organic, whatever. Cool.
Mhm.
Well, let's talk about this index some more.
Yeah.
I got to there's on your website, there's the click here for it's something like the first 24 pages of the dissertation. And I got that far, but I mean, I'm just partially I'm jealous and fascinated by the project. And I'm curious, I mean, there's historically there are quite a number of, cellists that are not the names of whom are not commonly known who put their own cello technique book out there. Like, how did you go about choosing which ones to focus on and how did the project evolve?
Right. Well, that's I wanted to focus on more than I ended up with so basically my thesis supervisor and I, we had to set some parameters. I mean, it would just be outrageous to say I'm going to index every single exercise that has ever been written for the cello. That's outrageous. So we ended up setting some research parameters. Basically, it's what was available in the public domain on IMSLP, as well as what was on the RCM's, the Royal Conservatory of Music's cello syllabus. So those two presented actually quite a large body of work. And then, of course, the idea is to expand in the future. There were so many things where it's like, oh, I wish I could do this. I wish I could add this book or this exercise that I use all the time, but it's not in the public domain. Or the idea is that I wanted it to be accessibility was the main driver of this. At least in my experience, I found so much value in these technical exercises. I mean, and by that, I should define, we haven't actually said, I'm not talking about etudes. And I'm not really talking about the sort of rudiments either. These are exercises like you mentioned, Sevchek, think Foyard daily studies, the Grootsmacher daily studies, the Kosman exercises. People probably know those, the Klengels. These kind of exercises, which are meant to get at a specific technical, like a specific technique. They might have a specific pedagogical purpose. But yeah, I'm not talking about like Popper etudes, for example. We're not talking about the Piatti or nothing like that. Short, efficient exercises. And so, but for me, I find a huge benefit in these, both from a technical point of view, but also in the confidence building. When I felt that I had a strong technical foundation, I felt like, oh, no matter how intimidating this music is, I can figure it out. I have the tools. I have this foundation, and I might not be able to play it yet, but I feel confident that I have the skills to do that because of this study. So I found this huge benefit, but I also knew I'm lucky that I had teachers who put this stuff in front of me. And I know that's not the case for everyone. That some of these exercises are out there, but unless you know the specific page of this 150-page book, of the whatever, the Pais book that you want, this particular thing, unless somebody has curated a collection for you or, from some other experience, how are you supposed to find these amazing exercises? So that was the main driver for me, is that I wanted things to be accessible, which meant that, at least from a publishing point of view, for me as a researcher, it needed to be in the public domain. So that was a big part of the narrowing of the scope for the project. And I will tell you honestly, as a team of one, it helped to narrow the scope, because what I did was I took every book, I went through every page, every exercise, tagged it with every single detail I could possibly think of. So for example, like exercises in a specific key, in a specific position, shifting from first to fourth position, shifting from first to third position, any possible thing. And the way it works is they are sort of tiered, like exercises with the left side, the right side, other. And then from there, we get more and more specific and granular with the tags, which resulted in the creation of this index, which is now searchable, sortable. Like you can type in a specific phrase. You could search by author, filter. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's not like some fancy thing I created. I'm not that skilled, but
No, it's very
but it
handy.
works. It's functional, and I will tell you, I've used it. I can't. How many times in a lesson has somebody said, "Oh, I don't really feel confident with my scales and thirds. Do you have it written out? I don't feel confident transposing. Do you have the scales written out in every key?" And I said, tap tap tap. Search scales and thirds, 2 octaves. Yes, I do have that for you. And I just send them a link to IMSLP or a PDF or whatever. So yeah, it's not the it's on the Open Science Framework. You can download it and use it. I realize that probably not everyone is as excited about it as I am, but people like us might find it very useful. And my goal was to make these exercises more accessible for
Yeah,
anyone who wants to use them for any reason.
that's tremendous. That's tremendous. I think about you're saying unless you know exactly what page out of these 150, just even the foillard, there's a lot of it where, okay, I get it. We have all of these finger independence things while we're shifting, and then we have these large shifts, and then we have these scales. But there's one page in the middle, exercise 20 something or other, I think it's right before the double stops, where he just has these very short, here's something to do with diminished seventh chords, or augmented tread, like, why didn't he run more with these? These are great.
That page is phenomenal. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's so good. He calls them like miscellaneous arpeggio exercises, which is which, sorry, I digress. I get very excited
Oh,
about these exercises.
dude.
The other problem is, even if you know what you're looking for, the way the author, the way the cellist titled things might not be particularly helpful. It might not be the same word, like arpeggio exercises might mean something different to me than it does to you, and something different to Foyard than it does to Grützmacher. How are we going to label these things?
Right.
So another thing I put into the document is sort of, I called them search synonyms. Like
Good.
there's just certain things that terminology varies from person to person, cellist to cellist.
Yeah, even
But
just
yeah,
translations.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finger independence exercises, trill exercises, same thing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
cool. Well,
Double
and I
stop.
think so I'm also curious, I mean, to me this sounds like it will probably for you be one of, I mean, could be several, but a lifetime project that you follow. Are there certain other collections of exercises that you're chomping at the bit to also include it when you get the chance?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, anything that's not currently in the public
Yeah.
domain, when as soon as it is, I'll be very excited. But then, of course, I think it's not uncommon for current teachers to publish the exercises that they use within their studio. So
Mhm.
a big part of the dissertation was and my own research was a series of sort of semi-structured interviews with current cello teachers because it's all well and good to study these things, but so what? I wanted to know how these exercises are being used in the current studios. So I talked to cellists, and it's not uncommon for teachers at conservatories, universities to have a book of their own exercises that they use in teaching, and you might not even come across it unless you happen to study with them. I don't think, for example, I don't think I would have found Steve Doan's cello ergonomics had I not studied with him.
Mhm.
So books like that would be amazing, obviously with the author's consent to include it, but that could be, just so amazing to have that kind of exercise available to those who
Yeah,
are interested.
yeah. Well, a couple that come to mind, because you're right. I mean, things like Christopher Bunting's exercises are not going to be public domain for a long
Right.
time. But two possibilities. One is Fritz Mogg and Rudolph. Yeah, at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro Cello Library. And how, I mean, bless them, they're they're, like, yeah, feel free, use it. Just give us credit as to, that it exists here. Like, okay. I mean,
Mhm.
so that's an interesting collection of different approaches to some of the exercises. And then the other thing I think this way because George Nykrug would always point me towards, he said, don't discount looking over into the violin pedagogy and stealing from them. And so things like Simon Fisher's books, they none of them are that I know of transposed out of treble clef, but you can still try them out and go, oh, that's a really good one. I'm gonna use that as a cello player.
I love that. And like you say, there are so many that I use and have come from the violin technique, or it's like I love this idea of what is this pedagogue getting at? What they're publishing these books and saying these are what I believe to be the essential elements of string playing, and here's how to work on them. And so it's so fascinating to see where they overlap, where
Yeah.
they disagree. It's really and where violinists and cellists are agreeing or disagreeing. And one thing as we're now talking, one avenue, because I'm so interested in contemporary music, I would love to include exercises that address the more contemporary repertoire. Stuff that's in the public domain isn't dealing with some of the techniques that we're using in these, current, like anything. There are just some techniques and exercises that aren't addressed
Right.
in
Right. I
in the
know.
public.
You practically, for the seagull effect, you still go on YouTube and look seagull effect and watch Russell.
Exactly, exactly. So some of these, I would be thrilled to include that kind of
Yeah.
exercise. There's another, not only, when I say like contemporary cello technique, you might have an idea of what that means, but I'm also thinking about like there's a phenomenal book by Mike Block.
Mhm.
It's a collection of etudes, really. It's called like Contemporary Cello Etudes, I think. I have it on the shelf. I should pull it out. But they're etudes, yes, but there's exercises in there as well, written by a collection of cellists in their area of expertise. So things like, blues pizzicato and chopping, like fiddling techniques, and things about rhythm and intonation, like that kind of thing would be really exciting to include as well.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe I'll email Mike Block.
right. Yeah. That's great. That sounds like, I do know that there's no small percentage of people who get a doctoral degree and kind of who they know they have to do some dissertation project, and you go to your advisor, what should I do for my project? And the advisor's like, well, that hasn't been done. Okay. You know what I mean? Where the level of enthusiasm about the project is medium or less for some people, but it's great to find one where you're just you know um, use it on a regular basis and excited to expand it and excited to see how many more people can find uses for it for themselves to make these things more accessible. That's hats off to you. That's great.
That was to any of your viewers who are interested in doing a DMA, the best piece of advice I got about the dissertation was choose something that you genuinely care about. And I did that, and it made all the difference in the world. I had some peers who were just, it's such a slog if you really don't, you have to genuinely care about your research. Otherwise, it can be a very miserable endeavor.
No, you
And I'm
take it.
not saying it's not miserable
No,
anyway.
it can be because you take it to your major professor, hoping, please don't give it back to me with more corrections, and here it comes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
But yeah,
great.
to this day, it was important to me to research something that I cared about and that I thought would really make a difference to me and to my students and to the cello community.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky that I found something that, intersect all of those goals intersected in this project. So
Yeah, well, thank you for doing it. That's great. So, upcoming other projects or performances, what does the rest of 2024 hold in store?
yes, yes, yes. So, well, it's not 2024, but I will plug once again our performance in we have in February we'll be playing the Vivaldi Double Concerto. It's with Waukesha Area Chamber Orchestra, right? I have the title right.
Watertown area chamber organ.
Watertown. Shoot. Okay, I knew.
That's right.
I
You were
I said
testing
that.
to see if I
I'm so I apologies. My dad is going to have my hide for that, but it's his fault for conducting so many groups all over Wisconsin. You can't keep it straight. Anyway, so that's coming up in February, and then I've got one other thing I think would be really interesting. So I'm not sure, we didn't really mention, but I'm living in New Mexico right now.
All right.
Currently, I'm in New Mexico.
Okay.
So, and one thing that's coming up, I'm doing, well, two things. they've got some upcoming concerts with the Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival outreach program. So we're visiting schools. There's like, I want to say like 15 elementary schools throughout
Oh, great.
the state that we're going to go play chamber music for them. And it's just such an exciting project. And we're going to play Mozart and Kodály and, big repertoire. And these little kids they can really handle it and they love it.
Nice.
It's a sort of historically underserved population here in New Mexico, and musically underserved. And I'm really excited to play chamber music for them. Then one other project coming up, and this is a group I play with semi-regularly when you were asking about contemporary groups that I play with.
Yeah.
There's an organization here in New Mexico called Chatter. It's based in Albuquerque, but they also have a location in Santa Fe. And these, I have to tell you, some of the most exciting, interesting performances I've ever been a part of.
Wow.
The idea is, the Chatter, their slogan is music worth talking about. And it's basically, a blend of your more standard repertoire and the newest contemporary, most exciting, adventurous repertoire. They do a concert every weekend, 50 weeks a year, and it's a morning concert. The tickets are pretty cheap. You're in and out, you get a free coffee, and you listen and you never know what you're going to get. Like sometimes it's right down Main Street repertoire, and sometimes you're like, what did I just hear? It's so exciting, and the approach is very adventurous, open.
Nice. Nice.
So I love that we play a couple pieces, and then a poet reads a poem. We have a moment of silence, and then we play a little bit more, and then you go about your day. It's just such a friendly, inviting way to experience new music. So I've got some performances coming up in January with Chatter. I met a composer here. She's Albuquerque based, Monica DeMarco, and this piece we're going to play is got electronics and some improvisation, some lighting and text from a poem. She's the poet laureate of the Navajo Nation. So yeah, I love this kind of interdisciplinary, exciting, adventurous type of playing. So that's coming up, Chatter and some outreach concerts in the New Mexico area. And then of course, our Vivaldi
Right.
concert.
That's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time. It's been great visiting with you, Allison, and hearing about what you've been up to and what you're going to be up to, and best of luck to you in all of it. And I'll look forward to rehearsing with you. I mean, it'll be here before we know it, the way time
I
flies.
know. I know. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I was so excited to join you today. I'm happy to be here.
Tremendous, outstanding. And for everybody out there, we'll see you this time next week. Take care.
You had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello.